Hey guys, Aaron Cybertron Zeng here, and the VGC 2020 rule set was officially released today. I wanted to make a video going over the rule set, giving you guys some of my thoughts and impressions, as well as a snapshot of what the early metagame will probably look like in the first couple of weeks. Really excited now that VGC 2020 rules are announced. I'm going to be doing a lot more content outside of just the daily battle videos that you see on the Road to Rank series, and it's a really exciting time because there's a ton of people interested in getting into competitive Pokemon in VGC. So if you know any of those people, please feel free to share this video or the channel with them in general. I'm going to be making a lot of guides in the upcoming weeks to really help newer people get into the competitive scene. So yeah, as always, if you enjoy, please share support by leaving a like in the video. I'd really appreciate it. To anyone that is new and might not know who I am, welcome to the channel. My name is Aaron, as I mentioned, and I've been a competitive VGC player since VGC has existed all the way back since 2008. Been a content creator since around 2015. I've played a lot throughout the years, and in more recent years, I've transitioned over to becoming a commentator and a content creator. So if you've watched the World Championships in the last couple of years, commentated a lot of those, including the 2016, 17, and 19 World Finals. So yeah, really excited to just kick things off, and let's just dive into things. There might be some new people who don't know anything about competitive Pokemon or VGC watching this video, so if you don't know what it is, it stands for the Video Game Championships. It's the rule set that we use for the live Pokemon circuit that's held by the Pokemon Company International, so if you've ever watched the World Championships, this is the rule set that we use. It rotates every year, and it's existed all the way since 2008. One thing that makes this a little bit different is, unlike Smogon rules, which is user-curated, VGC rules are created by the company, and yeah, they pretty much stay like that. There isn't like different tiers or anything. There's just a list of Pokemon that are banned, and that's pretty much it. So, for 2020, what makes VGC 2020 unique? First of all, of course, they're going to be double battles in Sword and Shield. All Pokemon must have the Galar symbol, so that means that you can't transfer old Pokemon. Obviously, we can't even do that right now, but once you can't use old Pokemon from previous games. You have to bring it over and either breed a new version or catch a new version within the game. All the Pokemon must be from the Galar Dex, and they're allowed, but the only Pokemon that aren't allowed are Mythicals and Legendaries, so, you know, relatively small ban list, but I think it's quite good that those are banned. All Pokemon are set to level 50, meaning that even if you're, say, level 1 or level 25 in the game, it will be automatically set to 50. So, in older years of VGC, you could pull off, like, level 1 shenanigans with Pokemon or level 49 shenanigans. Now, that's not the case. You cannot use the same Pokemon on your team, and nor can you use any same item. So, you know, Species Clause and Item Clause, nothing crazy there. And, as always, 90-second team preview. The next couple points are a little bit more interesting. So there's three aspects to the timer now. You have a 7-minute chess clock of your time, basically. So this is time that runs down specifically for you while you're making your moves. If you go past 7 minutes, you will lose the game automatically, no matter what the board positioning is, no matter how many Pokemon you have relative to your opponent. So be careful about that. You also have 45 seconds to make your decision, and what's being reintroduced is this overall game timer. So back in older years of VGC, say like 2016 and before, you had a game clock which once it ended, whoever had the advantage would just win the game. So now the game timer is actually being reintroduced after being removed from the last couple of years or so. So now there is a 15-minute game clock that will tick down. That includes pretty much your moves. It includes the animations, includes switching, includes everything. So from the start of game till the end of the game, you have 15 minutes. If both of you are still playing up until those 15 minutes, then a winner will be decided based off the number of Pokemon people have and, you know, just like overall field status. So be careful about that because that is something that is now reintroduced. Dynamax is allowed, which I think most people were expecting, but the biggest thing and the biggest part of this announcement is that Gmax will also be allowed. However, it will be allowed kind of on a rolling basis. What does that mean? Well, as you know, Gmax is relatively rare to get in-game. That being said, during certain periods, there are some Pokemon that will be significantly more common as a Gmax Pokemon in the game. So as those Pokemon become more common, then Pokemon will release them and will allow them to become legal in the format. There is a Play Pokemon VG Rules and Formats document in the description below. They'll be updated every few months, and as soon as a new Pokemon or new Gmax Pokemon is allowed, it will be updated in that document. So, you know, of course, anytime a new Gmax Pokemon will be allowed, I'll be covering it on this channel as well. But yeah, it's interesting because we're only starting off with a relatively small pool of Pokemon. If you're wondering what those Pokemon are, here are the 10 Pokemon that are allowed to Gmax as of the first day of the rule set. So I'll kind of cover over my thoughts on these Pokemon more specifically, but it's obviously not a very extensive list, and Charizard actually can only have Blaze as well, so can't have Solar Power. And if you remove Eevee, Meowth, and Pikachu, which people probably won't be using, then it's a relatively short list of Pokemon, so not too different from the online rule set that we currently see on Battle Stadium. Of course, Battle Stadium is the rule set that you can play currently in-game. It's the online ladder, basically. And VGC 2020 is just, slightly different from that rule set that we have for Season 1 currently. GMAX, of course, is allowed in VGC 2020, whereas Battle Stadium does not allow it. And as we mentioned, there are a bunch of different timer mechanics. The timer for VGC 2020 is basically completely different from Battle Stadium. So the biggest one is the battle time being 15 minutes, but also you have less your time in general and less move time as well. Be careful about that. It is a pretty substantial difference between 45 seconds and 1 minute. So yeah. If you have played the Battle Stadium all, then you'll know that this is relatively similar, with these small nuances being the key differences. And if you haven't, then it's a great time to try out some competitive battles in-game right now. So jump into it and try it out just to see what people are using. So, what are my actual early impressions of the format, of the rule set, and of what I think is going to be common? Well, first of all, I think Dynamax is an incredible mechanic in doubles. I know that a lot of singles players aren't a big fan of it, and I totally understand why, but I think it's awesome for doubles in VGC, and I have really high hopes for it. In my couple of weeks of playing so far on Battle Stadium, I think it's been so fun, and it's been by far my favorite mechanic out of all the more recent ones like Megas and crystals or Z moves. So yeah. And as a result, a lot of teams don't really build around one Pokemon to Dynamax specifically. You might have one that will prioritize it, but for the most part, a lot of the best teams I've seen are relatively flexible and can Dynamax any Pokemon at any given point, which is really interesting. So as a result, I think for Gmax Pokemon and Gmax moves, they might be good, but I don't think a lot of teams will revolve around just Gmaxing one Pokemon every game. You'll have that as an option, but you'll still not prioritize it in most of the cases, I think. And as a result, I also just think most Gmax Pokemon are pretty niche. That being said, Snorlax, as we'll talk about a little bit later, is going to be absolutely huge and meta-defining for the format, I think. So that is pretty much, I think, the biggest difference between what you're going to see on Battle Stadium right now and what we're going to see in VGC 2020. A lot of the Pokemon that can Gmax also are just kind of better as Dynamax Pokemon sometimes, like Corviknight and Dreadnought, where the added effect they get from the normal Dynamax is often just better than the added effect they get from their Gmax attack. The timer being reintroduced means that you do have to play around timer strategies a little bit more now, so be aware of that, because that is something that did not exist for the last couple of years. Now it's being reintroduced. If you're an old VGC player, you'll be used to this, but if you're new, it might be something that is going to take some adjusting to get into. Overall, having played Battle Stadium so far, I am a huge fan of the format, huge fan of what competitive play looks like right now. My only one hope is basically Gmax Snorlax and some of the other Gmax Pokemon not becoming too meta-defining. I personally don't think they'll be so crazy to the point where every team will carry it, and that's all I want, because I think right now Battle Stadium is super fluid, and I think the 2020 rule set should be quite similar to that. So, because of that, there are some early meta strategies that you can expect to prepare for that we've seen based off Battle Stadium so far. And so here are a couple of strategies that I think you'll definitely be seeing in the first couple of weeks of VGC 2020. Hard Trick Room is going to be quite common. One of the most common leads of that is Hatterene and NDD, where you have Follow Me and Trick Room, and it is there aren't that many counters to it, so it is something that can be really hard to prepare for, and also can just sweep you once set up properly. Tyranitar Excadrill as a sand combination is quite common, and there's tons of different ways to run these. And if you're curious about these, I'll do a more in-depth video covering archetypes and ways to counter them in the future, but just wanted to give people some impression of what they should expect to see going into VGC 2020. Tailwind's going to be really common. Whimsicott's the most common user, but you'll have other things like Corviknight or Braviary, and sweepers such as Choice Scarf or Choice Band Dracovish paired off with it. Max Airstream is often used on a lot of these Tailwind users like the aforementioned Braviary and Corviknight, because not only can you get the Tailwind up, but you can also, get a leg up on opposing Tailwind and speed control by just going for one single Max Airstream. So that's a Dynamax move you're going to see a lot of. Beat Up in Lucario, a strategy that Wolfie Glick popularized. I think that you should definitely prepare for, because if you're not prepared for it, it can kind of just sweep through you. Dual screens like Clay Grimmsnarl, I think, is an early support Pokemon that's been seeing a lot of use from the new Repulse Pokemon, so expect to see that. A lot of Pokemon are taking advantage of Weakness Policy now with Dynamax and Gmax. Weakness Policy is really great, of course, because it activates if you survive any super effective attacks, and with Dynamax, you give yourself so much more bulk that you are almost always surviving a lot of these super effective attacks, and so we commonly see that on Pokemon like Tyranitar, Rhyperior, Colosso, so definitely be careful about that. Weather in general is always good. Sand is obviously the most common one right now, but things like Charizard paired with Ninetales, Pelipper, and Ludicolo, Pokemon like Barraskewda, you should definitely expect to see as well. And these are all strategies that we already see in Battle Stadium. Outside of that, Gmax Snorlax and I think bulky teams revolving around Trick Room or just having a lot of berries on your team, that's going to be really common, I think, as soon as Snorlax is released, and that's going to have a pretty substantial impact on the metagame. So be ready for Gmax Snorlax. Having some coverage against it might be good, because that's something you're certainly going to see. I also wanted to just create a couple of useful graphics for Pokemon that you should expect to see. So this is a list of old Pokemon, and it's not really sorted in any way, shape, or form, really, but I would say the top 2 rows or top 3 rows are a little bit more common than what you might see in the bottom. Although Snorlax should probably be moved up once Gmax is actually allowed. But yeah, for the most part, there are a ton of Pokemon that are old and certainly viable. These are just the ones that I've seen more commonly online being played on teams right now. And I think like the majority of teams you go up against will at least have like 2 or 3 of these at least. So yeah, and you know, if you're trying to get Pokemon in game, these are certainly Pokemon I think you should prioritize, because they're all going to be quite good in their own way, shape, or form. Here is a list of newer Pokemon that I've seen and run up against. I think, you know, the first 2 rows are a little bit more common. You could probably swap Toxtricity for Weezing or Darmanitan, but overall, yeah, these are some of the more viable new Pokemon that you'll probably see. And the bottom row, I think, you know, a little bit more niche, as well as the big squirrel guy. But in general, having played around 100 games online or so, these are all Pokemon that I've run into and certainly can be run competitively. I'd say you should definitely, you know, prepare for or expect to see like the first 7 in those 2 rows. So things like Corviknight, obviously Dracovish is picking up a lot of steam, Dragapult, and whatnot. So yeah, these 2 graphics just cover pretty much like the majority of Pokemon I think you'll see, especially in the earlier weeks, as people kind of stick to either what they're familiar with or see what other people are using. So let's talk about Gmax. What's the deal with Gmax and what's going to be good? Snorlax is the answer to that, first of all. I think Snorlax is probably by far the most viable Pokemon out of all the Gmax Pokemon. That's for a couple of reasons, because first of all, you know, with Gmax Pokemon, you still want to be using Pokemon that are pretty good, or with Dynamax in general. Like, yeah, Dynamax or Gmax makes all Pokemon a little bit more viable, but some Pokemon are just really good even if you don't Gmax or Dynamax, and that's one of the reasons why it's a really interesting concept. So it's like, if you have a team where all Pokemon are just pretty solid overall by themselves, then you have more flexibility in what you want to Gmax or Dynamax, whereas if you have a Pokemon that's kind of bad normally, you are probably going to want to prioritize Gmax or Dynamaxing it more, and that's probably not great for your team composition, at least earlier on. We'll see if any, you know, innovative or creative strategies get introduced as the metagame progresses. But yeah, Snorlax is going to be by far the absolute monster to take care of. I'll link a link in the description below covering all the added effects from Gmax, but Snorlax is just already tanky, and its Gmax attack allows you to replenish berries, and Snorlax is a Pokemon that loves berries, obviously, like the 50% berries that are now 33% berries in this generation. With its ability, with its bulk, with its synergy with so many teams, you're going to be seeing a lot of Gmax Snorlax, I think. As for other Pokemon, I think, you know, there are 7 that are not the non-fully evolved Gmax, and I think definitely, like, you could throw them onto a team. So I think, like, Butterfree, Sandaconda, and Centiskorch are pretty interesting because of the added effects. Charizard, I would, you know, think would be more viable, but with the lack of solar power, I just think it's, like, not as strong because solar power just hits so much harder. And I think, like, Dreadnought and Corviknight have pretty cool effects, and if you have a team that specifically wants to counter something, for example, with Corviknight, let's say you want to counter Grimmsnarl, you could use its Gmax attack to break the screens. But in general, with Corviknight and Dreadnought, their normal Dynamax-like effect is better because, like, setting up rain is just more important for Dreadnought, and setting up speed boosts from the flying type attack is more important for Corviknight. So, you know, the bottom row, it's not like they're bad by any means. I just think, like, they're less viable because you either want to prioritize the Dynamax version, or in Charizard's case, you just don't have the best ability available right now. Sandaconda and Centiskorch are both interesting because their moves allow you to trap Pokemon in, and trapping Pokemon in is always a really big concept in VGC and doubles because it, you know, substantially limits the amount of plays that your opponent can make. So yeah, I think out of these, I mean, I kind of expect to see some teams around all of them. Snorlax by far I think is going to be the most common, where like that's going to be thrown around in a lot of teams. All of these are certainly viable, but I think like the effects from Butterfree, Centiskorch, and the Sandaconda are a little bit more interesting, whereas the bottom ones, like, they're interesting, but I just don't expect to see them as much. And once again, Charizard not being able to have solar power is kind of a big deal. As for future Gmax releases, you know, this is still definitely super up in the air. We don't even know when they're going to come out, if they're going to come out, and which ones will be allowed, which ones won't be. But I think, you know, like, Grimmsnarl has had some early hype because of its ability to put a Pokemon to sleep, as well as doing damage, which is a big deal. Both Grimmsnarl and the Hatterene are just really common Pokemon in the format already, so of course giving Gmax to them just opens up doors for more possibilities. And then I included a list of Pokemon that I think are pretty interesting because of their side effects. You can read all of those in the description below, but for example, Lapras sets up screens, Gengar traps you in, yeah, and all of these just have like side effects which I think like can be really taken advantage of, maybe on a more niche team, so it's not like you're going to see them on every team, but I think a good player can build a really cool strategy around some of these more interesting Pokemon. So yeah, we're going to see when these are released, and as these come out, I'll be doing, you know, videos on them, covering them, and letting you guys know how the metagame will shake up based off that. But yeah, that pretty much covers all the main points I wanted to talk about. So what until now, right? We still have about a month or so until the rules actually switch over. So first of all, the rules won't actually be in game for another few weeks. Season 2 of Battle Stadium actually starts on January 1st, so we've still got less than a month or so until you can actually play these. Of course, you can battle casually for fun against your friends with this rule set, but you won't be able to play on the online ladder until then, unfortunately. But I would still highly recommend playing on Battle Stadium doubles to get a feel of the format. I'll link a couple of resources in the description below if you want to literally go right now and try it out. There's a ton of cool rental teams that you can borrow and play with, and it's a great way just to kind of get your feet wet with the format. Obviously, Battle Stadium doubles is not going to be exactly similar to VGC 2020, but just understanding how Dynamax works in doubles and seeing some of the common strategies I think will help you get a feel of the format. Showdown's obviously a great resource. I don't think they have the rules implemented as of right now, but hopefully they will soon. Be careful because some of the mechanics are buggy, so you know, I'm sure they're working really hard to fix all of those bugs. But I would recommend playing in game a little bit more to get a feel of it. Of course, if you want to try out teams and you don't want to build them necessarily in game immediately, Showdown is the better resource there. But yeah, just play games, get a feel of how things work, and really just yeah, get your team ready as well. Get some sense of what you might want to run once 2020 rules are out. And of course, Gmax is really interesting, so you might want to look around strategies revolving around Gmax, you know, really abusing Snorlax's Gmax, for example, or some of the other ones like trapping your Pokemon in with Scorch or the Sandaconda. So yeah, so what can you expect to see from this channel moving forward? Obviously Road to Ranked, which is the battle series that I do on a daily basis that I've been doing, but expect a lot more. Working on a team building guide, hoping to get that out before the end of the week, and that one, you know, will include some of the information from this one, but we'll go more in depth in kind of cores that you can choose, Pokemon that are common, kind of different ways that things synergize in general. As I mentioned in the beginning, expect an introduction to the VGC scene as a whole. So if you don't know kind of what the different levels of tournaments are, how to qualify for the World Championships, what you can win from these events, how to really go to an event, or budgeting for a tournament, that all will be covered in that guide. Also be doing a guide on all the top VGC resources. So what are all the websites you need to have bookmarked? Who are the top content creators you should be following? What are the best ways really to get into the scene? Those will all be around. And finally, one thing I want to do is countering top combinations in the early meta that we see from the Battle Stadium. So some of those combinations I mentioned earlier, like Heart Trick Room in Indeedee and Hatterene, like Tyranitar Excadrill, kind of giving you guys just a quick overview of some Pokemon that you can add or some ways that you can beat those strategies. And in general, more in-depth guides on individual Pokemon. I have not put those out because I wanted to wait until the metagame or the rules was released to see what the metagame would kind of shape up to be, and then kind of start creating guides around more specific Pokemon. So those are all things you can expect to see outside of just daily battling content. If there's anything else that you would find helpful, definitely let me know in the comments below. Anyway, I hope this was a decent introduction to the rule set, to what you might see, to some of my thoughts, and I'm really excited to start off VGC 2020 coverage for this channel. So thank you for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Share with anyone that might be interested in getting into competitive Pokemon or VGC, and I'll see you guys soon. All right, peace.